Hi all, thank you for joining with us today. Today's Tech Talk is Backend Performance Testing and Challenges. This is a project-specific test we carried out in our project Execute. So we will describe you about the experience we got performing this performance test in our project. So the agenda is introduction, main objective, requirement gathering and test planning, test tool selection, starting performance test process. We will demonstrate about our test process and test analysis and challenges. Moving to the introduction, I will give you a brief introduction about performance testing. Performance testing is a non-functional software testing type. It measures system performance in terms of responsiveness and stability when tested under varying workload conditions. So the goal of performance testing is not to find defects but to eliminate performance bottleneck. In performance tests, we can focus on three main areas: speed, which determines application responses quickly; scalability, which means the amount of users or load the system can handle; stability determines whether application is stable under varying workloads. So after discussing the problem statement with your client, you have to set your main objective. In our project, we discussed with our client, other team members, devs and VM and all, and we set our main objective like this: system should be able to perform without crashes when specified number of parallel users are performing the critical scenarios in the system under the specified data volume without exceeding the specified response time. So according to that, after that we discussed with our client and we set our requirement. So there we identified 12 highly used scenarios after discussing with our client, and we determined those highly used scenarios should be executed under this amount of data volume distribution. When we execute those scenarios under this number of volume, we have to perform our performance test. Data volume distribution is 50,000 schemes and 5,000 users. Under this load, we had to perform our test, and we determined the number of concurrent users as 20 users per hour, and we determined our response time as 3 seconds. So our response time should not exceed 3 seconds. All these things you have to discuss with your client and set. You can't decide that by yourselves. So that according to those requirements, we set 3 non-functional requirement points to be satisfied during our performance test. They are: non-functional requirement 1 is performance data volume. The system should be able to function under the following amount of data: 50,000 schemes and 5,000 users. NFR2, performance concurrent users. The system should be able to support 20 concurrent active users per hour to perform the identified highly 12 scenarios. Non-functional requirement 3, performance response time. The system response time for user requests should not be exceed 3 seconds. So after that, you have to plan your test as a QA team. So there we have to mention these main points. So first, you have to mention purpose and introduction of your performance test, why and what we are doing here, and the entry criteria, which means specific conditions and activities that must be presented before starting the testing process. So as examples, environment requirement should be completed, and application should be stable to execute your scenarios, and the scenarios should be identified discussing with client. And after that, you have to determine the exit criteria for your performance test, the specific conditions, activities that must be presented before completing the test process. You have to set that as non-functional targets should be met as agreed, and you have to mention what are the environment requirements that you need to perform your test. So here we use JMeter. Then after that, you have to set your performance test objectives. So in our project, we have to execute highly used scenarios without failures under given data load by specific number of users. So the response time should not exceed 3 seconds. And also you have to state test types there. What are the testing types you are going to perform? There are various performance testing types like load, volume, endurance, etc. And also after that, you have to state performance test activities. What are you going to do during your performance process? So you have to set up your environment, scripting and execute and generate reports and analyze the report. In the reporting and analysis phase, you have to capture your data reports and determine the success of areas of your API request and document and present the test results to be identified by client. After that, we moved into the test tool selection. According to your project needs, you have to determine which tool is best for your project. So we researched two tools, K6 and JMeter. After researching on them, we identified that JMeter is the best one to go with because it's UI oriented and need less JavaScript knowledge, not like in K6 tool. And also it gives detailed reports to us so we can present them to our client easily. So we use JMeter version 5.4.3. When we move into our performance test, as I mentioned you earlier, we had to identify highly used scenarios and determine the user distribution. We had to model our user and scenario distribution like this before starting our performance test. Why we do these scenarios are executed parallelly to each other to make the test conform to real world behavior. Rather than running the same set of samples for an hour, this method is more accurate and real when considering how actually the users of a system perform in the real world, which means that we know that in real world, all users will not do same steps in same scenario. We have to determine the user distribution for scenario wise to align that with the real world scenario. As shown in the chart, percentages of users will do task 1 at X time while another set of users are doing task 2 at the same time. Likewise, distribute the number of users into the scenarios. So we are going to run these 12 scenarios over of time by using 20 concurrent users parallelly. Then we will do the demo how we executed these scenarios like this. So Naduni, over to you.
Thank you, Madhushika. First, we have to capture the process, demonstrating the capturing using this dummy website. For that, we use BlazeMeter plugin. All we have to do is click on this button and do our process. It capturing the all requests we send and get to this meter extension. Like this, once we stop the process, we can get that captured process as a JMeter file like this. Once I show you, once we have previously get, these are 12 scenarios Madhushika talked about. Then we have to open those on JMeter. We need to import those JMX files. These are the 12 scenarios. One scenario, there are number of these requests. First, we must screen the request we captured. We should remove the request that is not related to the main process and get the values, some values like this. For that, you can use preprocessors and post-processors and regular expression extractors. Once we clean and prepare the process, we can run this. When we running, we have to use listeners, especially at this listeners, this result string listener from here, and also this simple data writer listener here, this one in the listener we have to mention this result.csv empty csv file for save our data, report data. Once it was created, we get this kind of results report, csv report. Using that one, we can create a HTML, generate a HTML report. All you have to do is take the results CSV and the user properties file from JSON bin directory. This one, user.properties file, and mention the output directory and generate report. You must mention the output directory which is empty one. You can mention the empty folder like I said before, this folder, and generate report. Once we generated the report, we can see this one is the generated report. You can see all the details. This is the report. We have all the graph here, constant time or response times or time, percentiles, and so on. That is all about demo. Can continue, Madhushika.
Thank you, Naduni. So after generating the reports and graphs, we have to do this for several executions. executions, because during those executions we will have number of issues. So we also had such issues. I have given you some examples of issues occurred in the current system, which means before we enhanced with the performance fixes. So these are some examples. User group update failure due to high number of existing user count. Get notifications failure due to high number of existing schemes and high number of schemes. Add-in trusty failure due to endpoint timeout error. So we have to solve these things with the help from developers, and we have to do several executions to do this. So you can see in the generated aggregate report, in the error column, you can see that there is a error 0.01. So we have to determine in which API this error occurs, and we have to do the fixes with the help from developers and do several executions. Then, as Naduni showed, this is the HTML report we generated using the performance test, and also we can generate several types of Excel sheets as well, like aggregate report, and there is also a full request report which will include all the API requests you send to server. So after generating those reports and graphs, you have to do the test results analysis after doing the fixes. So after the execution, the aggregate report is generated by JMeter tool. Basically, this report generates a table to display the results with the row for every API separately, and also there is a graph called active threads, means active users over time, which is generated to show distribution of how many concurrent users were active during the test. And also you have to compare those results. You have to compare before and after results using the generated reports. How you enhance the system performance by doing the fixes. So you have to analyze and present it to your customer. So compare before and after results using the generated reports and graphs. You have to analyze response times, error rates, and do the analysis to justify your non-functional requirement points. So different graphs can be configured and generated as per the project need. I have mentioned you here about the aggregate report, which means an Excel sheet. So you can see the columns here. You can use these metrics and justify your non-functional requirement points, which we set when starting the performance test. So I can mention you main metrics that we used in our project to justify our points. They are error and average response time, or else you can get 90th line percentage also. These are the columns that we generate in our aggregate report, and also this is the active threads over time graph. So with the help of these reports and graphs, you have to justify your results to the customer to say that you have enhanced the performance according to their need. If I describe you about this graph, it shows the number of users gradually increased during the test run until it reached 20 users. So according to our project, we needed 20 users per hour. So we have to justify that using this graph. According to the aggregate report, we saw that there are no errors in the aggregate report. So by using both these graphs and Excel sheet, you have to say client there are no errors in the system. So Naduni will describe you about the challenges we faced during our project.
Thank you, Madhushika. First, there are 5 challenges we mainly face. First one is lack of proper testing scenario. That means performing test requires you to test the application under reasonable scenarios using performance testing tools. However, lots of time the enterprise we do not have budget, time, environment for executing tests. One of most efficient way to conduct performance testing is generate a replica of production environment. We did not use production environment actually. We used dev environment. We have to consider so many aspects like technology protocols, browser tools, etc. Otherwise, we end up selecting wrong tools or giving wrong outcomes to the customer. The second one is analyzing the performance test outcomes. In this, we have to be very careful. Otherwise, the outcome we give to the customer can be wrong. Like this is indeed one of significant and challenges for concepting a good amount of judgment and knowledge. We need to do this. And time and budget reduction. Actually, this is a real challenge for us. You may have noticed that we use base meter instead of manually adding HTML, HTTP request like the normal way. Actually, it's the recommended way, not used to base meter, but the amount we have to test, there are 12 scenarios. That's why we use base meter, because we have a limited time budget. We know that both K6 and JMeter tools can use to do the performance testing properly, but we use JMeter for one reason, that because it's free. For K6 tool, there are limitations in free version, and then the wrong selection of performance testing tools. When first we chose the K6 tool, but then we moved to JMeter. This won't happen if we have prior knowledge on the test tools. If we choose K6 tool, then there is only 50 requests per 1 month. They allow only for free versions, and there's no HTML reports. Likewise, wrong selection of tools, we end up in proper outcomes. Test coverage, we need to analyze test coverage and identify 12 scenarios. Without that, if we didn't do the coverage analysis, then we will end ignoring the important parts. That's all. Madhushika?
Yeah, so to sum up, we have to plan the performance test properly. It is the main important thing actually. We had a lot of difficulties because of the less planning. So we should have proper knowledge before we move into the test process. We should have proper knowledge about this tool, and basically you have to take requirements from client, and they should be solid and should not change, because otherwise we will have to face some difficulties when doing the performance test. And also we have to select the proper tool according to our project needs, and also we have to make sure that all the team members have knowledge to perform the test within the given time period. Otherwise the time will exceed, so that you have to do the proper planning before you start the performance testing. That is the main important thing I have to point out here. So I think you have learned something from our tech talk. Thank you for your participation.